Welcome back to another episode of the Buried Talent Podcast. I'm Ken Freire here with the founder of Frontier Operators and my co-host, Patrick Lowndes. Patrick, last episode, we talked about the why, the mission of this podcast, but we want to hear more from you. Like, how did this all start with you and how was this birthed?
That's a big question. It's a big question, but I'm glad we're asking it because I'll bet as I share a little bit about it, some of you will be like, "And that was me too, growing up." So maybe I'll dial it all the way back to when I was just a kid and the thrill of selling garbage back to construction workers, and they bought it. It was when I was a kid. I was probably first grade, and we were in this housing development. And so picture like across the street, they're like building two houses. There's this big pile of scraps. I thought I wanted to be a carpenter. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, let me go build stuff. I just got, hammer, saw. And I was like, can I use some scraps? Went and built two guns. And I don't know why. I just had this God-given intuition of like, let's build a cheaper version and a more expensive version. So I had like a $1 gun and like a super deluxe kind of gun. They like swivels and all sorts. I went back to the construction worker like a couple hours later. I was like, hey, would you like to buy my guns? He bought both of them, and I just like $3 at in the first grade, and I'm like, oh, touchdown! Like, you can take trash and add value to it, and then boom, and like that. I wouldn't have used those words, but for me, that was kind of the living idea took root that wow, I can add value to the world. And so that started when I was super young. I did do a little bit of lemonade stuff. My real big business that was a regular business was a lawn mowing route. I'm sure many of you are listening did that as well. I made like an official, like, here's all the different, types of patterns and cuts and add-ons. You can do like a side edge, a sidewalk edge, all sorts of, fancy add-ons as I was, playing with all the ideas. And, I was making enough money where I bought my first car before I could drive it. I bought a car.
That's awesome.
15, didn't even have a license yet, but I'm like, I'm going to need it. So I'm going to buy it now. And so this idea of like creating, building stuff has always just God has put it in me. And the thing was for me is that really blossomed in high school. Some of you also did like business competitions, FBLA, Future Business Leader of America. I was on the DECA side. We were like DECA Marketing Association. we thought we were the cool cats. Still think we pretty much were. But that was where it was like, here's a scenario. And I learned to think on my feet. Like probably the most valuable thing I did in K through 12 was thinking on my feet, business. Like you have 10 minutes to figure out what you're going to say to like a professional judge in 10 minutes. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So it just like puts me in the pressure cooker. And I've used that skill set now ever since, 20 plus years. Like that's actually a key skill set that was developed in high school, being forced to like think on my feet about, what am I going to do with this business scenario? So those are a few spots, Ken, like just little vignettes of like construction thing and the lemonade and the lawn mowing route, how that led into kind of throughout high school, just to kind of get you started.
Yeah. It's fascinating because most of you won't know this. Patrick created a book called The Mills Family of Entrepreneurs, Discovering Business and Honoring God Through It. The reason I bring it up is because Patrick gave my kids a copy. And I have 4 kids, 8, 6, 4, and 2 at the time of this recording. And I started reading it to them. And they're like, oh, Mr. Patrick wrote this book. Yeah. And I'm like, you guys can create a business too. They're like, what should we create? And they just did a garage sale. I'm like, well, let's just see if you guys could sell anything. And I remember the first time they sold stuff, they were like, we need to find more stuff to sell. and then I'm like coaching them through how to sell. What should they say when people come in? And it was fascinating for me because now I'm like, wow, I'm actually teaching them entrepreneurship right now. I'm teaching them sales and what to say, how to act, how to respond to adults and kids when they come by.
Yes.
And it birthed something in them. Patrick, for you talked about that same like birth of like, I can do this. Walk us through how do people discover that? And what was it that made it so exciting for you?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was realizing that if I could stay disciplined, like I did some work and then I saw a result of that work. And I mean, it's funny, like the motivation to start a lawn mowing business, it was actually, my mom was like, hey, you need to eat this veggie burger. And I'm like, this looks like throw up. Like, this is gross. And I'm like, I would rather, and I was like 10 at the time, didn't know how to mow. I'm like, I'd rather mow the lawn than eat that burger. And she's like, oh, really? So my mom was like, go learn how to mow the lawn. And so my dad showed me how to mow the lawn as sort of like, yeah, I'd rather be doing this. And it's like the Lord was like leading me. He's like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to give him veggie burger. That's going to get him into this path. So for me, it wasn't even like I had this cool, like this guide to walk me through it. And what you're alluding to there, if you want to check it out, if you have kids, you're listening to this, Bike Startups is the business and innovation kids for entrepreneurs. That's Bike and the startups. So if you go to bikestartups.com, tons of cool resources. Basically, I built them for my own kids, but why not help tens of thousands of other kids at the same time? Just makes sense, right? So, but yeah, those kinds of moments for me, Ken, is what ignited this idea that, wow, I can use my skill set for more. And then from there, as I noticed that, I started saying, well, who else can help me develop this? Who else can help me, become a better business person, a better entrepreneur? And so we've even done some video series. I've got this thing called the Confidence Builder series because my kids were having a hard time like having those conversations with strangers, going and getting feedback, asking about their ideas that they love so much that they didn't know if people liked them. So yeah, it's blossomed beyond the book now to like, I want to provide more resources there to help the kiddos on that front. But what I see that, Ken, is like the very beginning of the journey, helping young kids start to think about this stuff. And then where we are on this podcast with now running Frontier Operators is, hey, I've gotten through high school. I'm starting to get serious about how do I use my skill set, right? And I could talk a little bit more about the journey that for me is probably the next impactful moment is when I was coming into college. Shit, you want me to go there next?
Well, yeah. As you're going through college, let me ask a slightly different question before you kind of go into there. As you're going through college and going through the struggle of like the excitement, what was the struggle or obstacles you actually faced? Because I think a lot of people have that excitement, right? We get that exciting part, like, oh, I want to do this, but there's a whole bunch of roadblocks. So walk us through those a little bit first.
Yeah. Okay. So the first one I'd say is finding a community of people to practice with. So for me, it was when I was a freshman in high school, I found the marketing club, the DECA students, and I jumped in that. And by the time I think I was a junior, I was president of DECA or something like that. So one is like find community. It's hard to do this alone. And I certainly would pull it out of neighbors and, other, adults in my neighborhood, trusted adults I can go and talk to and kind of learn from. So one is find a community. That was the first barrier, is like, I'm kind of lonely in this and I need more help, and realizing I need some help. Two is just coming up with ideas and at bats, practice, right? Again, business clubs are good scenarios for that. But, if you're listening to this, you might relate with this, where you're in college and you're like, man, my career, my resume looks a little weak. Like, yeah, I was a server at that restaurant, or I was a front desk clerk, or I was an intern, or I did, I worked at this job that, I don't really want to talk about on my on my resume. So the other thing is finding places to practice and develop your skill set. That was a barrier for me, especially when I wasn't like ready to jump in to a full-time gig. So I would say that's part of it. The challenge is I don't want to be alone. I got to have something to work on. And then maybe the final thing to round it out in threes is I needed feedback in somebody who is way better at business and who actually wanted to invest in me. And for me, that was in high school, like a high school, business teacher, kind of a DECA teacher. But it was a little harder. You can get some professors that want to invest in you, but you really got to go broader. You got to go to the community and the leaders around you in the community that at your church maybe, or in your family network. Maybe somebody who runs they run their own company. And so I would just say there's a lot of power in not only finding people in community, finding the examples and of the things that you can do to get good and refine your skill set. But then third, finding mentors to come and help you develop and give you feedback and tell you where, hey, like your little, I remember I'll give you a screen, just a snapshot. I was in high school and one of my favorite business mentors, he was running a big, medical company, and he's a CEO, a really successful guy. And I got all the way to the end of like my ask, and I kind of flopped. I fumbled the last little part of the ask. I was asking him to like donate to something. And he's like, Patrick, if you run the ball all the way down the field and you get to the 10-yard line, the 5-yard line, and you get stopped and the ball turns over, like, then what was all that effort for if you couldn't convert to a touchdown? He's like, he's like, I can see you're struggling closing the sale here at the end. I don't quite know how to respond to you, but what I want to tell you is you got to get the ball across the line and help me get across the line, right? And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I still feel
How,
that today, that feedback, right?
you talk about these three things, right? That you struggled with. How did your journey walk us through in a few minutes? Your journey of like actually starting to grow in those, and how did you feel? Like both the good and the bad in that process.
Yep, that's good. Well, I'll tell you this. So I'm going to move it from high school to kind of college. I think this will be helpful for
Yeah.
people as they're listening to this. Here's what my experience was like. I got an entrepreneurship degree. Fortunately, I did an internship program, kind of a gap year that gave me some really practical work experience. I was doing like 30 hours a week. It's actually where Ken and I met almost 20 years ago now. But we were doing some really great work on the side of our getting started with our freshman sophomore year of college. But when I was coming out of college, I I struggled to find, like, yeah, I had some entrepreneurship majors and people in business school I could kind of riff with, but very few were faith driven people because I was at a secular college. But the thing that mattered for me was I was coming out of college still with not a lot of experience, and I had that third piece, that, remember, the mentors in life. And I remember this was me at coming out, almost about to graduate, months away from graduating. And some leaders in my life, some mentors that I really trusted, said, Patrick, we love you. We love what God is calling you to do. At the time, I was actually wanting to help and work with churches to be more passionate about focusing their efforts globally. And some of these leaders, that these mentors in my life, they came around and said, we love you. We love where you're going. Like, we affirm your general calling, but we don't support you doing this work at 22 with no life experience. I mean,
Wow.
literally, I was in tears trying to process through, like, okay, I'm engaged. I'm about to graduate. I thought this is what I'm going to do with my time, and you're dropping the bomb on me right now. Like, what do you mean I don't have the experience? And this is that middle piece of those three things, right? I didn't have enough life experience and career experience, work experience to do the thing that I wanted to do. And so it hit me, Ken, like a ton of bricks.
I like I'm hearing you say that, and I'm just thinking about how gut wrenching. I've had those experiences too, of like, it just feels so gut wrenching where you're like, you say you believe in me, but you're not giving me the opportunity. It feels almost contradictory.
Yeah.
And I could tell, I know a lot of young professionals, they probably feel that same way. They're like, man, I know I'm gifted. I know I'm talented. I know I have the skill set. I just need the opportunity.
Yeah.
So like, how did you overcome that?
Yeah. So I'm about to graduate, just months away from finishing my degree, my, again, entrepreneurship degree. And I'm kind of going back to ground zero. Like, all right, Lord, what do you want me to do? And I want to say this because I think some people that are listening to the show, even if it's 7 people, one of you 7 need to hear this. But it's this: God said, go and be the person that you want to call people to be. Go and be that person that you want to call people to be, so that you can encourage people out of already having been there, right? And so what he told for me, he said, you got to go get a job. You got to go get really good at that job and be faithful. Don't lose sight of this passion to serve me and honor me and use your skill set, your gifting for me. Don't lose sight of it. And I thought, like, wow, this is a hard journey. Like, he's now putting me on this path of something. At the time when I was 22, I was like, I'm just going to go get like a sales job somewhere, and I'm going to go start selling stuff. And I looked at a few different options, in the market of what I could do. And as I was interviewing for certain jobs, couldn't find the right one. And I still say to this day, God found me through a recruiter that called me and said, hey, I want you to jump into the software industry. So, like, sovereignly, God was like, and you're going to be in the tech industry. I didn't even have words for that. Didn't even really know much about that in 2011. But that I got my first tech sales job at PayScale. And all of a sudden, I began about a 5.5, 6 year journey of developing a skill set as a software sales guy, right? And so I just continued to work out, what does it now look like for me to have this job, but feel like there's so much more. There's so much more God wants me to do. But right now, He's asking me to be faithful and learn how to do sales really effectively.
And for a lot of young people who are listening to that, that might feel really hard, right? Where you're like, I gotta be faithful, and you don't know how long that would take, right? For everybody's journey is different. For you, like, what were you feeling at that moment when you're like, I'm trying to be faithful, but you're also waiting for the next thing?
Yeah, yeah. Uh, I would say for me, it was a I'll say continual conversation with the Lord, saying like, man, what's next? Like I was continually asking that question, what do I do next? Because it was pretty clear, like I could just climb the ladder, I could become a manager. I actually several times didn't go the manager track. I felt like that was not in alignment with where God wanted me to go. So I was successful. That many times they like to promote successful sellers to do that, but I avoided that several times in a row. Just top performer by God's grace selling. And so for me, it was just a conversation of God, what do I do next? So that's the short version. I know we could spend a whole lot more time unpacking that, but it was all for me, Ken, about discerning what do I do with my time and my talent as I'm trying to develop myself, right? And so as I was sharing about just a minute ago, when I sold software for that first 5.5 years of my career, I was doing really well. Several times avoided kind of the invitation to be like a sales manager. Like I didn't feel like that was part of where God wanted me to go. And I just knew it took on more time, more effort. And so He kept me on the individual contributor track. And when I left my day job, I remember I was like, again, at the peak of my earning potential, wife and 2 kids. I was probably 27, doing really great. And it was just scary. I mean, my flesh was like, no, what are you doing? You're cutting yourself off. Right. And it was me launching into Vendor Hawk in the Techstars program. So as I launched that company in that accelerator, I left a lot of safety and security that I had grown to know and appreciate. And then that's kind of, again, what just catapulted me into just the importance of mentorships. Like the first couple weeks, they had this thing called Mentor Madness, literally. And you go and you meet. I think in the period of 5 days, I literally had I want to say 40 conversations, 50 conversations. It was
Wow,
ridiculous, right?
that's a lot.
And out of that, and literally like 8 hours a day, like 30-minute meetings, just tons of this kind of stuff. Out of that, probably condensed it down to about 4 or 5 key mentors that guided us through the program of building a startup. So raised a bunch of venture capital, some angel investment capital. And as I scaled that company, it was only 10 months later that totally by God's grace, we had a small team of 10 people that we started conversations with ServiceNow and a few other big companies that were looking to be in the space, and basically sold the company right a few days after I turned 30. So I'm just 29 years old building this company, and I turned 30 and boom, I'm all of a sudden in this category of like, oh, you're a successful founder. But really it was like God giving me a royal flush hand of cards. And so that was my rapid journey as an entrepreneur, building that tech company, Ken. And I did it because I'm like, I want to be helpful to people running companies around the world. And the Lord's like, I'm going to give you the fast track to that. And then now at 30, you're going to sit and kind of steward that exit. And that's kind of what got me into the impact investing space as well.
So, I want everybody to hear that because it's so important to see that you went through these obstacles. You were being faithful at a job where you were like, man, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. And then the Lord started opening doors. You got into the tech space. You pretty much, scaled it, sold it, exited it well, and then started to just kind of like do investing. Right. And now you're kind of at a place where God was like, hey, I want you to start showing this to other people and start training other individuals, because we've talked about that, right? Like not everyone is going to be the entrepreneur, the visionary, but you had so many people supporting you, right?
Yeah.
And walking you through that. So walk us through a little bit of that kind of process and how you got to where you're at today.
Yeah. Well, it's probably best to start with, even before I sold the company, I started trying to help coach other entrepreneurs that were
right.
not as good at sales. But then after I did sell, I was at ServiceNow for almost 5 years. And we were basically, as a product manager, I had to learn what it meant to be a product manager and like work with lots of developer teams and all sorts of cross-functional stuff. But I had realized like at the end of my time at ServiceNow, I got a taste of almost every company size and scope, like from, venture scale and private equity company at pay scale to early stage vendor hawk startup to like big companies scaling to thousands of employees. I mean, we went from like a brand new business unit in the single digit millions to like hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue within about 4 years. It was crazy.
That's insane.
And so like I've tasted all this stuff, and the Lord still at the end was like, okay, now it's time for you to go. And I'd been helping, invest in founders, and I noticed this trend over and over again. And the trend was visionary founder has a vision, varying levels of like skill and expertise at running the business side of things. Sometimes horrible business person, sometimes like good at the sales part, but maybe not the technical or the other, aspects of the company. And I realized, wow, who is investing in the people that surround founders? And the answer was like, couldn't really find much. You got me. Again, I love Faith Driven Entrepreneur, what they do at Praxis to help entrepreneurs and builders. But there's very few. And then you have Faith and Work, which is like the big blob of like, well, there's everybody else, right? Just having the job. And there was nothing like purpose built for people that have a bit of an entrepreneurial bug, but really are like a finance person who loves accounting, or a marketer that doesn't have their own idea. They just love helping other people market, right? And so I just noticed like there's this language we need to start talking about, which we call business operators at Frontier Operators. So that's the gap that I saw, Ken, of like, wow, we need something to help that the rest of the people that surround and support entrepreneurs as they build and scale.
And we talked about this a little bit in the first episode. We'll talk about it more in this whole podcast of like, truly that business operator is very different than a business manager, right? Or like just a manager or a leader. They have certain mindsets that they bring to the table where they feel like they have ownership of the role and they think very differently, which is great, right? And that's the people that you wanted to start working with. So how did now you growing, you investing, you supporting other roles, how did Frontier Operators come to birth, and what are we doing to help people?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's three kind of stages that we help out in development in young professionals with Frontier Operators. The first one is at college and universities. So when you're in that kind of, 19, 20, 21, that early awkward stage of your career where you don't have a lot to show for yourself and you just need resources, you need at-bats. So we speak a lot at college campuses across the country, and even just college and young professional ministries that go tie in with it as well, and have a lot of like resources to give out. And so we developed the operator community for that purpose. So people that are just going through, they're getting their degree, but they're like, I need a tribe to work with that cares about this operator mindset. It's not just going to be generic Christians in work, but it's going to be more people that are a little bit more driven, right? So you have a community there that is really vibrant for any young professional can join it, especially those starting out in college. That's what happens at the university level. The second spot is right when you leave university. So that first year or two in the workforce full time, we have a program called the Collective, which is super helpful for developing, forming, shaping your actual skills. Like you learn the theory of it in school, but now you're out there trying to do it for the first time. And there's a unique set of questions you're asking. And so there's mentorship and development for people right there. And then a little bit later in career, Ken, like there's a lot of people that are just, 10 years behind us, right? They're in the first couple of years into their work and they're feeling like, man, I'm now getting good at this one skill. Maybe I'm even a manager or a great, a professional in this discipline, but I'm realizing I'm kind of narrow, and I'm realizing like I need to be better, well-rounded. So the Forge is the third program to help kind of, we say, mid-career professionals develop and become like well-rounded operators. So from university to the Collective to the Forge, those are the three ways we help out.
Yeah, and if you look at all three of those, it kind of coincides with your journey, right? Where it was just like, and my journey too, right? Where when I was young, right, just kind of going into college, I didn't know how to navigate. I needed the mentors. I needed people to walk me through those things. And then after college, just like someone who can help me refine and become a high performer. And then finally, like, I had great mentors. You had great mentors too that were like, we believe in you, we trust in you, and now let's take it to the next level and really get you to a place where you are a frontier operator. And that's what we're actually hoping to do for all of you who are listening, right? Is that concept of, man, let's get you to a place where you feel really well equipped to go do what you believe God's called you to do. Patrick, any final words that you want to share with people as we wrap up our conversation?
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that I'm super excited about here on this show is we don't want you to bury your talent and just throw it away so that you can just maximize your revenue and your earning potential and then just check a box of generosity, or maybe I'll do like a prayer group every now and then. Like, there's more for you. And so as you heard from my story, like, there are several points where God, again, my relationship, speaking with God, I think we all need to get better at talking with God and hearing his voice as we're discerning these things. And if we do it together, I think that, again, the Spirit can speak through other people as well. So I'm pumped for people as they jump into our show here, and as they also think about the communities that we have and the ways we can serve them. So, but yeah, this is the beginning of many great conversations, Ken. So as you're listening to that, let's wrap that up for today, and we'll see you next time on the show, Buried Talent.